David never believed in aliens, not until that Tuesday night when everything changed forever. He worked alone at the small research station in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. The job was simple: listen to space signals and report anything unusual. Most nights, he heard nothing but static and random noise from distant stars. It was boring work. But David loved the quiet and the endless sky full of stars. On this particular night, something was different. At exactly 2:47 a.m., his computer started beeping like crazy. The screen showed patterns he had never seen before. These weren't random signals from space. They were organized, mathematical. Almost like someone was trying to communicate. David's heart started racing. He checked the equipment 3 times to make sure it wasn't broken. The signals kept coming, getting stronger each minute. He grabbed his notebook and started writing down the patterns. After 2 hours of work, he realized something incredible. These signals were prime numbers, sent in a sequence that only intelligent beings could create. His hands were shaking as he typed his report, but then he stopped. What if he was wrong? What if this was just some satellite malfunction? His boss would think he was crazy. Everyone would laugh at him instead of sending the report. David made a decision that would change his life. He programmed the computer to send a response back. Into space, he sent the same prime number sequence, followed by Earth's location coordinates and a simple mathematical greeting. Then he waited for 3 days. Nothing happened. David couldn't sleep or eat properly. He kept checking the equipment, hoping for another signal. Maybe he had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he was losing his mind from working alone for so long. Then, on Friday evening, just as the sun was setting behind the desert mountains, the impossible happened. A shadow passed over the research station, but there was no sound of an airplane. David stepped outside and looked up. What he saw made his legs weak. A sleek, dark ship hovered silently above him. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Made of some material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship landed softly in the sand about 50 feet away. David stood frozen, watching as a door appeared in the smooth surface of the craft. Light poured out, brighter than daylight but somehow gentle on his eyes. A figure stepped out of the light. She was tall, taller than any human David had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow with a soft silver light, and her hair moved like it was floating in water even though there was no wind. Her eyes were the most amazing thing. They looked like tiny galaxies, full of swirling stars and colors David had no names for. She wore a flowing dress that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. As she walked toward him, David noticed that her feet barely touched the ground. Everything about her was graceful and otherworldly, yet somehow familiar. When she was just a few feet away, she stopped and looked directly at him. David felt like she was seeing right into his soul. "You sent the message," she said in perfect English, though her voice had a musical quality that made his heart skip. "You are the one who called to me across the void." David tried to speak, but could only make a croaking sound. He cleared his throat and tried again. You received it. You actually got my message." She smiled, and it was like watching the sunrise. "I did. I am Zara. I rule the Nexari people of the distant stars. For many cycles, we have watched your world from afar, but we were forbidden to make contact. Your message changed everything." "Forbidden by who?" David managed to ask. "By our own laws. Your species was deemed too young, too violent for contact. But when I received your transmission, I felt something I had never experienced before." She paused and took a step closer. Hope. David's scientific mind was racing with 1,000 questions, but he could barely form words. Why? Why did you come? Why break your laws? Zara reached out slowly and touched his face with her hand. Her skin felt warm and somehow electric. The moment she touched him, David saw flashes of images in his mind. Dying worlds, empty cities. Beings like her but fading away like ghosts. "My people are dying," she said softly. "A plague has taken most of our ability to create new life. We searched the galaxy for a solution, and the answer led us to Earth, to humans like you." David felt overwhelming sadness flowing from her touch. "I'm sorry. That must be terrible." "It is. But when your mind reached out to mine through space, I felt a connection I had never known. There was something in your signal, something pure and curious and brave. I knew I had to meet the being who could touch my soul from so far away. Before David could respond, bright lights suddenly flooded the area. Military vehicles surrounded them. Appearing as if from nowhere, soldiers in full gear jumped out, pointing weapons at both of them. Step away from the civilian, someone shouted through a loudspeaker. You are surrounded. Zara's expression changed instantly. The gentle, hopeful look disappeared, replaced by something fierce and protective. She moved in front of David, shielding him with her body. They cannot understand, she said quickly, her voice urgent. They see only threat where there could be hope. I won't let them hurt you, David said, surprising himself with his boldness. Zara turned to look at him, her galaxy eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. You would protect me, even though you barely know me. I know enough, David said, and he meant it. Something about her called to him, just like his message had called to her across the impossible distance of space. The soldiers were moving closer, their weapons raised. David could see fear and aggression in their faces. This was about to go very wrong, very quickly. Zara looked into his eyes one more time. Do you trust me, David Chen of Earth? Hearing his name spoken in her musical voice sent shivers through him. How do you know my name? I know many things about you now. Do you trust me? The soldiers were shouting commands, getting ready to shoot. David had maybe 5 seconds to decide. Stay on Earth and spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been, or take the biggest leap of faith in human history. He looked at Zara's beautiful, alien face and saw something there that made his heart race. Not fear, but possibility, adventure, maybe even love. Yes, he said, I trust you. She smiled again, that sunrise smile, and took his hand. Then hold on tight. We are about to begin the greatest journey of your life. The last thing David saw of Earth was the shocked faces of the soldiers as Zara's ship rose into the star-filled sky, carrying him toward a future he never could have imagined. David's stomach dropped as Earth became a tiny blue dot behind them. He was actually flying through space in an alien ship with a queen from another world. Part of him wondered if he was having the most vivid dream of his life. This is really happening, isn't it? He whispered, pressing his face against what looked like a window but felt warm and alive under his touch. Zara stood beside him, her silver hair floating gently around her shoulders. It is. You are the first human to travel beyond your solar system. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing at the same time, David admitted. Like every dream I ever had as a kid. All coming true at once. The ship's interior was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Strange plants with glowing leaves grew from the ceiling, their roots hanging down like beautiful curtains. Drops of water floated freely in the air, forming perfect spheres that danced around them. Welcome to my vessel, Zara said, gesturing around the incredible space. This ship has been my home for many years as I searched the galaxy for hope. David reached out to touch one of the floating water drops. It felt normal, just like Earth water, but it stayed perfectly round in the air. How is this possible? We learned long ago how to work with nature rather than against it. Everything here is alive and connected. She walked over to what looked like a control panel made of smooth stones. My ship responds to thought and emotion as much as to commands, as if to prove her point. The crystal walls suddenly showed images of deep space around them. David gasped as he saw stars and nebulas streaming past at impossible speeds. We are traveling faster than light, Zara explained. What you call hyperspace. The journey to my world will take 3 of your Earth days. David sat down on something that looked like a chair but molded perfectly to his body. Your world. What's it like? Zara's expression grew sad. Once, it was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Cities of crystal and light, floating gardens, beings living in perfect harmony with nature. Now, she touched the wall, and the images changed to show a dying world with empty cities and dim, flickering lights. The plague, David asked gently. It began 50 years ago. At first, We thought it was just a minor illness. But it attacked something deeper than our bodies. It damaged our ability to create new life. One by one, our people began to fade away. No new children were born. Our population dropped from billions to millions, then to thousands. David felt his heart breaking for her. That's horrible. I'm so sorry. We tried everything. Our greatest scientists worked day and night. We reached out to other species across the galaxy, searching for a cure. Nothing worked. She turned to face him, her galaxy eyes shimmering with unshed tears, until we discovered Earth. What's special about Earth? Zara moved closer to him, and David felt that same electric connection when she had touched his face back on Earth. Your species shares something with ours, a genetic compatibility. That should be impossible across such vast distances. Somehow, humans and Nexari are connected. Connected how? Our scientists believe that long ago, in the early days of the galaxy, our people shared a common ancestor. The connection runs deeper than blood. It touches the very essence of what we are. She sat down beside him, close enough that he could see the tiny stars swirling in her eyes. But the connection must be willing. It must be real. It cannot be forced. David's mind was reeling. You're talking about what exactly? Partnership, unity, a joining of our peoples that could save both our species. She looked down at her hands. But it must begin with two hearts that truly call to each other. The way she said it made David's pulse quicken. Is that why you came to Earth? To find a partner? I came because your message called to something deep inside me. In all my years of searching, I had begun to lose hope. I felt empty, hollow, like I was failing my people. Then I heard your signal across the void, and for the first time in decades, I felt alive again. David reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm and seemed to glow brighter at his touch. I felt something too. That night I sent the message, like I was reaching out to someone who was meant to hear it. Zara looked up at him, wonder in her expression. You did, somehow. Across impossible distances, your mind found mine. Suddenly, the ship shuddered slightly. Warning sounds echoed through the crystal chamber. Though they were more like musical notes than alarms. Zara stood quickly, moving to the control panel. The wall showed new images, several large ships surrounding them, sleek and powerful looking. What's happening? David asked, standing beside her. Zara's face had gone pale, making her silver skin almost white. We have been intercepted. Those are Nexari Royal Fleet ships. Your people, isn't that good? Not these ships. They belong to Prince Corvin, my former companion. He leads the faction that opposed my journey to Earth. Her voice was tight with worry. He believes that contact with humans will contaminate our bloodline. The largest ship moved closer, and David could see it was massive, easily 10 times the size of Zara's vessel. A voice spoke in a language that sounded like music mixed with thunder, filling the air around them. What is he saying? David asked. Zara closed her eyes, looking defeated. He is ordering me to surrender myself and turn over the human for questioning. Questioning? That doesn't sound good. Corvin sees you as a threat to everything he believes in. He thinks humans are too primitive, too violent to be trusted with Nexari secrets. She turned to David, her expression fierce. But he is wrong. I have touched your mind, felt your heart. You are exactly what our people need. Another message came through, sharper and more demanding than before. He grows impatient. Zara said, if I do not comply, he will take us by force. David felt fear creeping up his spine, but also something else, determination. What happens if we surrender? Corvin will take you to our homeworld, but as a prisoner, not a guest. You will be studied, tested, possibly. She couldn't finish the sentence. And you? I will face trial for breaking our highest laws. The penalty for unauthorized contact with a developing species is exile to the void. David looked at this incredible being who had risked everything to answer his message, who had saved him from the soldiers on Earth. She had shown him wonders beyond imagination and treated him with more kindness than most humans ever had. There has to be another choice, he said. Zara smiled sadly. The only other option is to try to outrun them to my homeworld. If we could reach the capital city, I can claim sanctuary and demand a formal hearing. But the journey is dangerous, and Corvin's ships are faster than mine. Then that's what we do, David said without hesitation. David, you do not understand. If we are caught, the consequences will be severe. For both of us. He took her hands in his, feeling the electric connection grow stronger. You came to Earth looking for hope, right? Well, I'm pretty good at being hopeful against impossible odds. It's kind of a human specialty. For a moment, Zara just stared at him. Then that sunrise smile spread across her face. You would risk everything for someone you barely. No, I know enough, David said, echoing his words from Earth. I know you're trying to save your people. I know you're brave enough to break laws for what you believe in. And I know that when you touched my mind, it felt like coming home. Zara's eyes went wide, the tiny stars in them spinning faster. You felt it too. The connection. I felt it. So let's see just how strong it is. She squeezed his hands, and suddenly David could feel her emotions as clearly as his own. Hope, determination, and something deeper that made his heart race. Hold on then, my brave human, she said, moving to the controls. We are about to find out if love truly can outrun fear. The ship suddenly surged forward, faster than before. Through the crystal walls, David watched as the Royal Fleet ships fell behind. But he knew they wouldn't give up easily as they raced toward an unknown world. David realized that his simple life as a radio operator was over forever. Whatever came next, he would face it beside this amazing alien queen who had risked everything to answer his call. Across the stars, behind them, Prince Corvin's ships pursued relentlessly. Their intentions dark and dangerous. The real test was just beginning. The first thing David noticed about Zara's homeworld was how wrong the images had been. Yes, the cities looked empty and dim from space. But as their ship descended through the crystal-clear atmosphere, he could see that this place was still, breathtakingly beautiful. Towers of living crystal spiraled up from floating islands, connected by bridges made of solidified light. Waterfalls cascaded upward into the sky, defying gravity in ways that made David's head spin. Gardens of glowing flowers covered every surface, their petals shifting colors like tiny rainbows. It's incredible, David whispered, his face pressed against the warm window. This is Lumina Prime, the heart of our empire, Zara said softly. Or what remains of it. As they flew closer to the largest crystal spire, David began to see the sadness hidden in the beauty. The towers were mostly dark, with only a few levels showing signs of life. The floating gardens were overgrown and wild, no longer carefully tended. It was like looking at a magnificent palace that had been abandoned for years. How many people are left? He asked. Perhaps 10,000 on this world. Once, there were 50 million. Zara guided the ship toward a landing platform near the base of the central tower. Most of the survivors live in the capital spire now. It is easier to maintain the life support systems. For a smaller area, their ship touched down gently, but before they could even power down, the landing platform was surrounded by guards. These beings looked similar to Zara, but taller and more angular, wearing armor that seemed to be made of the same living crystal as the buildings. The Royal Guard, Zara explained. They serve whoever holds power. Right now, that means they serve the Council, and the Council listens to Corvin. A figure approached their ship, moving with obvious authority, even through the crystal walls. David could see this being's commanding presence. He was tall like Zara but broader, with silver skin that had a metallic sheen and eyes like burning stars. Prince Corvin, Zara said, her voice tight with tension. The prince spoke in that musical thunder language, his voice carrying clearly into the ship. David didn't need a translation to hear the anger and disappointment in his tone. What is he saying? David asked. He is displeased with my actions. He demands that I surrender myself and turn you over to the council for judgment. Zara stood straighter, her own royal bearing becoming obvious. But I am still queen of the Nexari. I have rights that even Corvin cannot ignore. She touched the control panel, and her voice rang out across the landing platform, speaking in her own language. The guards shifted uncomfortably, and Prince Corvin's expression grew darker. I have claimed the right of challenge, Zara explained to David. By ancient law, any union that might affect the royal bloodline must be tested through the trials of compatibility. Corvin cannot refuse this request without looking weak in front of the council. Trials? That sounds dangerous. Zara took his hands, and he felt her worry through their connection. They are. The trials will test whether we are truly compatible. Not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. They will push us to our limits and beyond. And if we fail, you will be sent back to Earth with your memories erased. And I will be stripped of my crown and exiled. She looked into his eyes. But David, you must understand, these trials have been attempted before. The last candidate died. During the second trial, David felt his mouth go dry. Someone died? The trials are not meant to be easy. They test the very essence of what we are. Our deepest fears and strongest bonds. Many couples from our own species have failed them. Prince. Corvin spoke again, his voice sharp and impatient. He agrees to the trials, but he sets the conditions. We have 1 day to rest. Then the trials begin at dawn. Zara squeezed David's hands. Are you certain you want to do this? I could try to get you safely back to Earth. David thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The lonely nights at the research station. The moment he decided to answer the signal from space. The way his heart had raced when Zara first touched his face. He thought about her dying people. And the hope in her eyes when she looked at him. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. We're in this together. The ship's doors opened, and they stepped out onto the crystal platform. The air was clean and sweet, filled with the scent of those rainbow flowers. David felt lighter here. Like the gravity was less than Earth's, Prince Corvin approached them, his burning eyes fixed on David with obvious disdain. When he spoke, his English was perfect but cold as winter. So this is the primitive creature that has captured our queen's attention. He circled David like a predator studying prey. You are smaller than I expected. Weaker. How do you expect to survive trials that have defeated warriors twice your size? David felt intimidation trying to creep into his mind. But something about the prince's arrogance made him angry instead. Maybe because I'm not trying to prove I'm the strongest. I'm trying to prove that Zara and I belong together. Corvin's eyes flashed dangerously. Belong together? You are from different worlds, different species. What could you possibly understand about the responsibility of ruling an empire? I understand that sometimes the best leaders are the ones willing to risk everything for their people, David replied, surprised by his own boldness. Zara came to Earth because she cares more about saving her species than following old rules that aren't working anymore. For a moment, Corvin looked genuinely surprised by David's answer. Then his expression hardened again. We shall see if your courage matches your words, human. The trials begin with the labyrinth of fears at dawn. I suggest you spend tonight preparing to face the darkest parts of your soul. He strode away, his guards following. Soon, David and Zara were alone, on the platform except for 2 guards who kept a respectful distance. You did well, Zara said softly. Corvin expected you to cower before him. Instead, you stood up for what you believe in. I had a good teacher, David replied, smiling at her. So what exactly is this labyrinth of fears? It is a maze that shifts and changes based on our deepest anxieties and terrors. The only way to escape is to face these fears head-on and overcome them. But here is the crucial part. We must do it together. If we become separated or if one of us gives into fear, we both fail. David nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. What kinds of fears are we talking about? That depends on what frightens us most. For some, it is physical dangers, monsters, death, pain. For others, it is emotional, abandonment, failure, loss of those we love. She paused. The labyrinth knows us better than we know ourselves. It will show us exactly what we most want to avoid. They walked together toward the crystal spire, passing through corridors filled with beautiful artwork and glowing plants. David noticed that most of the palace was empty, their footsteps echoing in spaces that should have been filled with courtiers and servants. What are you most afraid of? David asked as they walked. Zara was quiet for a long time. I am afraid that I am not strong enough to save my people. I am afraid that every decision I make is wrong, that I am failing everyone who depends on me. Her voice grew smaller. And now, I am afraid that I am being selfish, asking you to risk your life for a cause that may already be hopeless. David, stop walking and turn to face her. Hey, look at me. You are not selfish. You saw a chance to help your people and you took it, even though it meant breaking laws and facing exile. That's not selfish. That's brave. But what if I'm wrong? What if humans and Nexari cannot truly bond? What if tomorrow we discover that this connection we feel is just an illusion? David reached up and touched her face, the way she had touched his back on Earth. Then we'll face that together too. But Zara, what I feel when I'm with you isn't an illusion. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced. She leaned into his touch, and he felt her fear mixing with hope through their connection. What about you? What do you fear most? David thought about it seriously. I'm afraid that I'm not enough, not smart enough, not brave enough, not special enough to be here with you. I spent my whole life feeling like I was on the outside looking in, like I never quite belonged anywhere. I'm terrified that tomorrow you'll realize you made a mistake choosing me, David. Zara said softly, you answered a call from across the galaxy. You left your entire world behind to help people you had never met. You stood up to Prince Corvin without flinching. How can you think you are not enough because you're a queen? And I'm just a guy who listens to radio signals in the desert. Zara smiled that sunrise smile. You are the guy who heard my heart calling across the void and chose to answer. You are exactly enough. They spent the rest of the evening in Zara's private chambers, sharing stories about their worlds and their dreams. David told her about growing up lonely on Earth, always feeling different, always looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone was looking back. Zara told him about the weight of responsibility, the pressure of being the last hope for her people. As the alien suns set outside the crystal windows, painting the sky in colors that had no names, they held each other close. Tomorrow would bring the first trial, and either the beginning of something amazing or the end of everything they had found together. Whatever happens tomorrow, David whispered, I'm glad I sent that signal, and I'm glad I chose to answer, Zara replied. Dawn came too quickly on Lumina Prime. David woke to the sound of crystal chimes echoing through the palace, their haunting melody both beautiful and ominous. Today was the day that would decide everything. Zara was already awake, standing by the window and looking out at the glowing spires. Her silver hair caught the light of the twin suns rising over the horizon, making her look like she was made of starlight herself. How are you feeling? David asked, joining her at the window. Nervous, scared, hopeful. She turned to him with a small smile. All at once. Is that normal for humans before big challenges? Completely normal, David said, taking her hand. I'm feeling all of those things too, plus a few others I don't have names for. They made their way to the central chamber where the trials would take place. The room was enormous, with a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever. Hundreds of Nexari had gathered to witness the trials, their glowing forms creating a sea of soft light around the chamber's edges. Prince Corvin stood on a raised platform, wearing ceremonial armor that looked like it was carved from a single piece of black crystal. Behind him sat the Council of Elders, 7 ancient Nexari whose skin had taken on an almost translucent quality with age. Citizens of the Nexari Empire, Corvin's voice boomed across the chamber. Today we witness the trials of compatibility between Queen Zara and the human David Chen. These trials will determine whether their bond is genuine and whether this union can truly help our people. David felt hundreds of alien eyes on him, studying him like he was some kind of unusual specimen. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism, and a few showed what might have been hope. The first trial is the labyrinth of fears, Corvin continued. The candidates will enter together and must find their way to the center, while facing manifestations of their deepest terrors. They may only succeed by supporting each other. Through their darkest moments, a section of the chamber floor began to sink, revealing a staircase that led down into darkness. Strange mists swirled up from below, carrying scents that made David's skin crawl. Decay, ash, and something else he couldn't identify, but that made every instinct scream at him to run. "Remember," Zara whispered as they approached the stairs. "Whatever we see down there, it cannot truly hurt us. The fear is real, but the dangers are illusions created by our own minds." "What if my mind creates something really terrible?" David asked. "Then I will help you face it, just as you will help me face mine." They descended the stairs together, hand in hand. The moment they stepped into the labyrinth proper, the world around them changed completely. David found himself standing in his childhood bedroom. But everything was wrong. The walls were cracking, paint peeling like dead skin. The bed where he used to read books about space and dream of adventure was covered in thick dust. Most terrifying of all, he could hear voices outside the window, his classmates from school, laughing and calling him names he had tried to forget. "We're David," they chanted, "always alone, always different. Nobody wants to be friends with the freak who talks to himself." The fear hit him like a physical blow. All those years of feeling like an outsider, of eating lunch alone, of pretending he didn't care when nobody invited him to parties or games. The crushing loneliness of growing up different, of having interests that other kids thought were strange. "David." Zara's voice cut through the cruel laughter. He turned and saw her standing in what looked like a throne room. But the walls were covered in portraits of Nexari who had died from the plague. "I can see your fear. Tell me about it." "I was always alone," David said, his voice shaking. "Always. The weird kid who preferred books to people. What if that's all I'll ever be? What if I'm not capable of really connecting with anyone, even you?" The laughing voices grew louder, more vicious. The room began to spin around him, but then he felt Zara's hand squeeze his. "You are not alone now," she said firmly, "and you were never truly alone before. You reached out across the galaxy and found me. Someone who was truly alone could never have done that." As she spoke, David felt their connection strengthen. Through her touch, he could feel her absolute certainty that he was worthy of love, worthy of friendship, worthy of being chosen. The cruel voices began to fade, but then the scene shifted. And now David was standing in Zara's nightmare. They were in a vast hall filled with empty crystal beds. On each bed lay a Nexari who had died from the plague, their once glowing skin, now gray and lifeless. At the center of the hall sat a massive throne, and on that throne was Zara herself, but aged and hollow-eyed, wearing a crown made of dead stars. "I failed them all," the nightmare version of Zara whispered, "every single one. They trusted me to save them, and I let them die. And now I'm alone forever, the last of my kind, ruling over nothing but ghosts and memories." David felt Zara's terror through their bond, the crushing weight of responsibility, the fear that every decision she made was wrong, the horrible possibility that she might be the last queen of a dead civilization. "You haven't failed anyone," David said, stepping closer to her. "You're still fighting. You came to Earth looking for hope, and you found it. You found me, and through me, maybe you found a way to save your people. But what if I was wrong? What if humans and Nexari cannot truly bond? What if I doomed us both?" The dead Nexari on the beds began to sit up, their empty eyes accusing. "You broke the ancient laws," they whispered in unison. "You contaminated our bloodline. You destroyed everything we were." David moved to stand between Zara and the accusing ghosts. "She took a chance on love," he said boldly. "She chose hope over fear. That's not contamination. That's evolution." As he spoke, something amazing happened. The connection between him and Zara flared brighter, and suddenly David could feel not just her emotions, but her memories. He saw her as a child, learning to rule. He saw her watching her people die one by one, helpless to stop it. He saw her making the difficult decision to break the law and contact Earth. And through their bond, Zara could see his memories too. She saw him as a lonely kid who found comfort in the stars. She saw him working night after night at the research station, hoping to find proof that Earth wasn't alone in the universe. She saw the moment he decided to send that first message, reaching out into the void with hope and courage. "We understand each other," Zara whispered, wonder in her voice. Completely. David agreed. The nightmare visions began to crumble around them. The dead Nexari faded away. The cruel voices from David's childhood fell silent. They found themselves standing in a simple room with two doors, one marked with a symbol. That hurt to look at, the other glowing with warm light. The final test. Zara said, we must choose together. David looked at the doors. The dark one radiated fear and doubt, everything that told them they were making a mistake. The bright one felt like hope, like possibility, like the future they could build together. That one, they said at the same time, pointing to the door of light. They walked through it together and found themselves back in the trial chamber. Watching Nexari burst into surprised murmurs, according to the displays around the room. They had completed the first trial in record time. Prince Corvin looked genuinely shocked. How did you escape the labyrinth so quickly? Most candidates spend hours trapped in their fears. We didn't escape them, David said. We faced them together. And we realized that our fears were smaller than our hope. Zara nodded. When we truly saw each other's minds and hearts, the illusions lost their power over us. One of the council elders leaned forward, her ancient eyes bright with interest. Show us this connection you claim to share. Zara and David looked at each other and smiled. Without speaking, they began to move in perfect synchronization. When Zara raised her left hand, David raised his right. When David stepped forward, Zara stepped back. They moved like two parts of the same being, connected by something deeper than sight or sound. The watching crowd gasped, even among the Nexari. Such perfect synchronization was rare and only achieved by couples who had been bonded for decades. Impossible, Prince Corvin muttered. They have known each other for days, not years. The heart does not measure time the way the mind does, the elder said softly. These two are truly connected. But before anyone could celebrate, alarms began, ringing throughout the palace. The crystal walls showed images of massive ships approaching the planet, ships that didn't belong to the Nexari. The Void Hunters, someone screamed. David felt Zara's fear spike through their connection. Who are the Void Hunters? He asked. Pirates? Scavengers? They prey on weakened civilizations. Her face went pale. They must have detected my ship's return from Earth. They know we have made contact with a new species. Prince Corvin was shouting orders, calling for the defense fleet to launch. But David could see the truth in the displays. There weren't enough Nexari ships left to fight off this invasion. The trials must continue, the elder announced. If these two are truly meant to save our people, they will need to complete all the tests. But now they will do so while our world is under attack. As enemy ships filled the sky outside and the palace's defensive shields flickered to life, David realized that the trials had just become a race against time. They had to prove their bond was real before the void ready for round two. Zara asked, squeezing his hand. The palace shook as enemy ships fired on the protective shields above them. Through the crystal walls, David could see streaks of energy lighting up the sky like deadly fireworks. The Void Hunters had come in force, and they weren't planning to leave empty-handed. The second trial must proceed, the elder announced. Her voice somehow calmed despite the chaos around them. The Chamber of Unity awaits. David and Zara hurried into the next trial room as explosions echoed overhead. This chamber was different from the labyrinth. It was perfectly round, with no visible exits, and the walls seemed to be made of pure energy that shifted and swirled like liquid light. What happens here? David asked, trying to ignore the sounds of battle above. We must become truly one, Zara explained. Her hand tightened his. Not just connected, but unified. Our thoughts, our hearts, our very essence must merge completely. If we succeed, we will share not just emotions but actual abilities. The energy walls began to pulse, and David felt a strange tingling sensation washing over him. And if we fail, then we are separated forever. The bond between us will be severed, and we will never be able to touch each other's minds again. Prince Corvin's voice crackled through a communication crystal. The Void Hunters are demanding we surrender the human. They believe his knowledge of Earth will make them rich beyond measure. You have minutes before they break through our defenses. David felt fear trying to creep into his mind. But then Zara's presence filled his thoughts, warm and reassuring. "Focus on me," she whispered. "Feel what I feel. Think what I think." They stood facing each other in the center of the swirling energy. David looked into Zara's galaxy eyes and let himself fall into their depths. Suddenly, he wasn't just seeing through his own eyes anymore. He could see himself through Zara's perspective, not just physically, but emotionally. He saw how she perceived his courage, his kindness, his determination to help her people despite barely knowing them in her mind. He wasn't the lonely outsider he had always believed himself to be. He was a hero who had answered her call across impossible distances at the same time. David began to see the universe through Zara's consciousness. He felt the weight of ruling an entire civilization, the crushing responsibility of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. But he also felt something else, her absolute love for her people and her willingness to sacrifice everything to save them. "I can feel your thoughts," David whispered in amazement. "And I can feel yours," Zara replied. "David, you are so much stronger than you know, so much braver than you believe." The energy around them intensified, and suddenly David felt something incredible happening. Zara's abilities were flowing into him, her power to sense emotions, to understand languages instantly, to feel the life force of every being around them. At the same time, his human perspective and creativity were flowing into her. "This is impossible," Zara gasped. "Humans and Nexari have never been able to truly merge like this." But it was happening. David could feel Zara's power mixing with his human determination and curiosity, creating something entirely new. Together, they were becoming more than either species had ever been alone. The chamber walls suddenly became transparent, showing them the battle raging outside. The Void Hunter ships were massive, black things that seemed to swallow light. They had broken through the outer defenses and were closing in on the palace itself. "We need to help," David said, and amazingly, he knew exactly how to do it. Through their merged consciousness, he could feel every Nexari in the palace, sense their fear and desperation. Together, Zara agreed. They reached out with their combined abilities, touching the minds of every defender in the palace. Instantly, the scattered Nexari forces began moving in perfect coordination. Pilots who had been flying alone suddenly worked as a unified fleet. Guards who had been retreating in panic regrouped and fought with renewed courage. Prince Corvin's voice came through the crystal again, filled with wonder. "What is happening? Our forces are fighting like they share a single mind." "Because they do," David and Zara said in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. Through their bond, they were connecting every Nexari in the palace, allowing them to share thoughts and coordinate their actions instantly. It was something no single Nexari had ever been able to do, but their human Nexari hybrid consciousness made it possible. The tide of battle began to turn. The Void Hunters, expecting to face a weakened and disorganized enemy, suddenly found themselves fighting a force that moved with superhuman precision and unity. But David could feel the strain on both of them. Maintaining this level of connection with so many minds was exhausting. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and he could see Zara trembling with effort. "I don't know how much longer we can hold this," he gasped. "Long enough," Zara replied. "Look." Through the transparent walls, they could see the Void Hunter ships beginning to retreat. Faced with an enemy that fought with impossible coordination, the pirates were cutting their losses and fleeing back into deep space. As the last enemy ship disappeared, David and Zara released their hold on the other minds. They collapsed into each other's arms, exhausted but victorious. The Elder's voice echoed through the chamber. "The trials are complete. Never in our history have we witnessed such a perfect union of minds and hearts. The bond between Queen Zara and David Chen is genuine and powerful beyond anything we imagined possible." Prince Corvin appeared in the chamber, his expression completely changed. Gone was the arrogance and hostility, replaced by genuine respect and wonder. "I owe you both an apology," he said formally. "I believe that contact with humans would weaken us. Instead, you have shown us a strength we never knew existed." He knelt before them. Something David definitely hadn't expected. Will you forgive my opposition? Will you allow me to serve this new alliance between our peoples? David helped the prince to his feet. There's nothing to forgive. You were protecting your people the best way you knew how. That's what any good leader would do. Over the following months, everything changed. David and Zara worked together to establish peaceful contact between Earth and the Nexari Empire. Their unique hybrid consciousness allowed them to serve as perfect translators and mediators between the two species. Humans gained access to advanced Nexari technology that helped cure diseases and solve environmental problems. In return, human genetic material and innovative thinking helped the Nexari overcome their plague and begin having children again. The first hybrid babies were born a year later, children who carried the best traits of both species they had. Zara's luminescent beauty and David's human curiosity, with abilities that surpassed anything either species had achieved alone. David often stood in the observation deck of their shared ship, watching Earth rise beyond the horizon while Nexari crystal cities floated nearby in space. The boy who had once felt like he didn't belong anywhere had become the bridge between two entire civilizations. Do you ever miss your old life? Zara asked, joining him at the window. She was carrying their daughter, Luna, whose eyes held tiny galaxies just like her mother's, but sparkle with very human mischief. Never, David said, taking Luna in his arms. Their daughter gurgled happily and reached for the stars visible through the window. I used to think I was alone in the universe. Now I know I was just waiting for my real family to find me. Zara smiled that sunrise smile that had first captured his heart. And I used to think my people were dying. Now I know we were just waiting to be reborn. Luna babbled something in a language that seemed to be part English, part Nexari, and part something entirely new. Through their bond, David and Zara could sense that their daughter was already reaching out with her mind, touching the consciousness of other hybrid children being born throughout the galaxy. She's connecting with the others, Zara whispered. In amazement, a new generation, David agreed, one that will never know the loneliness we felt. They'll grow up knowing they belong to both worlds and to neither, which means they belong to the universe itself. As they watched, more ships appeared. In the distance, vessels carrying families from dozens of different worlds, all coming to be part of this growing alliance. What had started as a desperate message sent into the void had become the foundation of a new galactic civilization. David thought back to that night at the research station, when he had decided to answer an impossible signal from space. He had been looking for proof that Earth wasn't alone. Instead, he had found love, purpose, and a destiny beyond his wildest dreams. Sometimes the best discoveries happen when you're brave enough to reach out into the unknown and trust that someone will reach back. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that someone will wrap their arms around you and say, "You're mine, and I'm yours, and together we'll change the universe." Luna reached up and touched both her parents' faces, her tiny hands glowing with the same energy that had saved the civilizations. In her touch, they felt the future, countless worlds, countless species, all connected by love and understanding instead of fear and isolation. The message David had sent into space had finally brought him home.